The fact that the Hobbit is a small set with only 5 archetypes, combined with the imbalance between those 5 archetypes, has a lot of people wondering, what am I supposed to do if I sit down to draft and Rakdos is not open? According to the 17 lands data aggregator, Rakdos is played about 1.5 times as often as the other major supported archetypes, and it is still winning a little bit more frequently. In my last video, I covered how to win with the other 4 supported archetypes, but that leaves out 5 options on the table that are actually winning some games. So today I want to talk about whether, why, and how you should play with these officially unsupported archetypes. This is a way to pick up some wins when the 5 supported archetypes are claimed at your draft table, and honestly also it's a way to have a lot more fun and a way more varied experience in a draft format that can feel a little samey. So I want to start with the unsupported archetype that I think is the most frequent and plausible one that you actually should get into, blue-black or Dimir. And by the way, you can listen to this audio only. I'll read all of the cards that I talk about. So the first thing that I want to show you are the top 5 commons in Dimir specifically, according to 17 lands. I think this is useful not just to know what you should take out of a pack, but to know what the archetype is trying to do. And the best performing common is Crude Bent Blade in Dimir decks. That's the black equipment for 3 that when it enters, the opponent has to sacrifice a creature of their choice. The second best performing common in Dimir is Stir Up Trouble. 1 black, destroy target creature, but you have to pay an extra 4 or sack an artifact or creature as an additional cost. Number 3 is Golem Silent Slinker. This is the 4/3 menace for 4, which has an adventure where you can put a counter on a creature. Ravening Warg is number 4, the 2/2 Death Toucher for 2. And finally, Bilbo Baggins Burglar. That's the 2/1 for 3 when it enters draw card, and it has an adventure to scry too. On 17 lands, all of these cards actually have an overall pretty good grade when they're played in Dimir. And the thing that really stands out to me, because I'm not just here to tell you what cards are performing best, I want to talk about the game plan that the deck is trying to achieve. What really stands out to me is that these are all classic control deck role players. The top 2 performing commons in the archetype, Crude Bent Blade and Stir Up Trouble, these are both removal spells. Ravening Warg, not exactly a removal spell, but a 2-drop with Death Touch, it will stop you from getting run over. It'll let you achieve your control game plan. Bilbo Baggins Burglar, a 3-drop that when it enters you draw a card, that is card advantage. And Golem Silent Slinker is the finisher that any control deck needs, just a 4-power creature that can get the game done when you've gotten your card advantage rolling and removed your opponent's beaters, and it also has the benefit that it keeps you alive because its adventure gains life. So I'm going to say essentially 3 removal spells, more or less, a card advantage piece, and a finisher. That sounds like a classic control deck breakdown. The uncommons tell exactly the same story. So Great Ugly Looking Goblin. This has an adventure for 2 to amass a Goblins 2, and then it's a 4/4 for 6 with a static ability that gives some of your creatures menace. This is a classic finisher. It also keeps you alive in the early game. It's also card advantage because it's 2 creatures in 1 card. Desolation Prowler is just a super efficient creature. That's the 2/2 for 2 that you can pay 2 and give it +2/+2. Large Bear, I'm going to call a finisher, the 3rd best uncommon in Dimir deck specifically. I thought this one was really interesting that it's good in Dimir, but I think it's just a way of ending games and winning. Bilbo Luckwearer, number 4 best uncommon in Dimir. This is the 1/1 for 2 that's unblockable when it deals combat damage to a player it loots. Just a classic piece of a really good card advantage, or at least card selection. And then the 5th best uncommon is Gnashing of Teeth. This card's really interesting because it's extremely good in Dimir, but it's terrible in some of the other green archetypes like black-green. Now, why would that be? It's very simply because control decks need removal. Every single one of these uncommons is quite good in Dimir, and you'll notice Bilbo Luckwearer and Great Ugly Looking Goblin are both essentially card advantage, I argued. Desolation Prowler is just strong on its own terms, but honestly, that and Large Bear qualify as finishers, and then Gnashing of Teeth is removal. So every single card at common or uncommon that's in the top 5 best in that rarity in Dimir falls into one of 3 simple categories: removal, card advantage, and finishers. I've actually been playing a lot of Dimir. For every deck that I talk about, I'm going to show you a deck that trophied, either my own or one that I found on 17 lands on the list of decks that trophied at Mythic rank. And I'm not going to say this is the perfect Dimir deck, but you can go through and you can classify what was a finisher, what was a removal spell, and what was card advantage. And basically every card should fall into those buckets. Now, before we even ask what we should do in Dimir, we probably should also be asking why should we even be in an archetype like Dimir that's not officially supported in the format. On 17 lands in Premier Draft, Dimir has been played just under 9,000 times. Rakdos has been played, spooky, 7,777 times. And Dimir is still losing about 4 percentage points more often than Rakdos, but actually it's, played about a third as often as Simic, and it's actually winning more often than Simic, and Simic is the worst of the officially supported archetypes. So why should you play Dimir in this format? I actually think it's a basically fine place to end up, but let's keep it in perspective. At least in Premier Draft Online, you should be playing it about a 10th as often as you end up in Rakdos, about a 5th as often as you end up in Azorius, and about a third or more as often as you end up in Simic. So I'm not saying that if you start in black and you see a bunch of red cards and a bunch of blue cards, you should just follow the blue cards into Dimir because it's fine. No, follow the red cards into Rakdos. It's going to be the place you should end up way more often. But there will be drafts where the person next to you is in Rakdos, but they're mainly taking red cards. So black is open and then blue is really, really, really open. You shouldn't be terrified to end up in Dimir in that situation. And when that happens to you, what you're aiming for is a classic control deck. You want as many pieces of removal as you can get your hands on. You want enough pieces of card advantage that you'll basically always have more cards than your opponent. And you need a few ways, 2 to 4 ways of finishing the game. All right, so that is deck 1 of the 5 unsupported archetypes. Next up, let's talk about Orzhov. It's played about, less than half as often as Dimir, but it has a pretty impressive win rate on par with Rakdos, but played way, way less. And I would say there's exactly one big surprise in this one. And by the way, if you like this kind of data deep dive content, make sure that you are subscribed to my channel on YouTube. In the Arena Direct for Hobbit Collector Booster Packs, I managed 2 7-0 trophies in a row. I believe we're going to have another Arena Direct this upcoming weekend. And the day before it launches, I am going to show you how I won one of those collector booster boxes with this incredibly weird looking pile of cards. I put a lot of thought into this build, and I think the fact that it went a clean 7-0 reflects that I understand something about how to build sealed in this format, and I'm going to tell you what that something is on Thursday or Friday. The best way to make sure that you see that video is to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. All right, so what is up with Orzhov in the draft format? Number 1 best common in Orzhov, surprise, surprise, Crude Bent Blade, the mythic common of black. Number 2, this is really interesting, Rage into the Valley. This is a 2 and a black for a sorcery, draw card and lose 1 life, amass goblins 2, basically Phyrexian Rager all over again. Number 3, Golem Silence Linker, that's the 4/3 menacing goblin with the adventure to put a counter and gain life. Number 4, this is the surprise, Patient Instructor. You might have thought that this was just an Azorius synergy piece, but the 2/2 for 2 and a white or blue, Vigilance when it enters Recruit, is good enough in Orzhov decks specifically, according to 17 lands, that it comes in as the 4th best common in Orzhov. And then rounding out the list of the top 5 commons, Bilbo's Deadly Slice, the Murder reprint, 1 and 2 black for an instant, destroy target creature. So 4 black cards. All of these cards are pretty good, but Orzhov is notably a little bit worse at the common level than Dimir was, and it's totally dominated by black cards. So what does a trophy deck look like? I pulled this trophy deck off of 17 lands. This was a deck that trophied at Mythic in Orzhov, and the thing that really strikes me about it is essentially this is a mono black deck where the person had the Mountain King's Return, that's that very high value saga that recruits and brings something back. Feely the Pathfinder, which is one of the top bombs in white, period. And then just like a Magnificent End, some creature enchantment, some random extra little filler. But pretty clearly what happened with this deck is it's a mono black deck that was slightly diverted from that goal by having some top white bombs, notably Feely the Pathfinder, and to a lesser extent, the Mountain King's Return. So what can we learn from that about Orzhov? Why would you ever get into Orzhov? I think it would happen if black is wide open, you're taking tons and tons of black cards, and then you get a white bomb. Or maybe you start out with a white bomb, but then you just have tons of incentive to just keep picking black cards. So you should be aiming for mono black, basically, if you're going to end up in Orzhov. It should be a situation where you're trying to get as many black cards as possible, and then you just happen to have a little bit of incidental white. This is a rare situation, right? And that's exactly why we saw that Orzhov is played, like 1/20th as often as Rakdos or something, roughly. But then the one big surprise, Don't leave those patient instructors out. If you're getting patient instructors, they're actually just good enough to go in an Orzhov deck. They're just good on rate. All right, so we talked Dimir, we talked Orzhov. Next up, let's talk about blue-red Izzet. Honestly, I love this one. In an analysis, it's always nice when there's one super simple, clean story, and Izzet is the paragon of this because it all boils down to one card. You know him, you love him, it's Bothersome Noisemaker. If you don't have Bothersome Noisemaker, don't play blue-red. If you do have Bothersome Noisemaker, maybe you should consider blue-red. So Bothersome Noisemaker is essentially the one spell slinging payoff in the format. It's a 2/2 for 1 and a red. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, amass goblins 1. This is the main card, maybe the only card, that triggers on casting a non-creature spell. And that is, of course, the core identity of Izzet, as you might have noticed if you played Standard or Modern recently. When you filter to cards, to commons and uncommons that are played in Izzet decks specifically on 17 lands, you see something really, really funny. Bothersome Noisemaker is not just the top-rated common or uncommon in Izzet. Bothersome Noisemaker is sitting at an A level grade. There are no A- level cards in Izzet. There are no B+ level cards in Izzet. You have to go down 3 fractions of a letter grade to hit the next best card in Izzet deck specifically, which is, you know, the usual suspects. Pinecone Strike, the 1 and a red to deal 3, Longleg Nuisance, the 3/1 flyer for 4. You have your Plunder the Trollshaws. This is maybe one of the main payoffs for your Bothersome Noisemaker. That's a 1 and a blue draw card, flash it back for 4 and draw 2. But it's really all about the Noisemaker. 17 Lands has these nice pages where they show you how often you win when you have a particular card in a specific archetype compared to another archetype. Bothersome Noisemaker decks that have it in blue-red are several percentage points more likely to go on to win the game after you draw it into your hand than decks that have it in black-red. So if I know that you drew a Bothersome Noisemaker, then I learn that you're playing Izzet. I should now think that you're more likely to go on to win than if you're playing Rakdos. Which is amazing because if all I know is that you're playing Rakdos, you're way more likely to win than if all I know is that you're playing Izzet, right? And people are playing Rakdos a bazillion times more often as well. And the only trophy deck that I could find in Izzet, or one of the few recent Izzet trophy decks that happened at Mythic, exactly showcases this fact with 3 copies of Bothersome Noisemaker and then a whole bunch of non-creature spells, especially Plunder the Trollshaws, Tidings of War, 1 mana, amass goblins 1, and then you can flash it back to amass goblins 3. If you have a Bothersome Noisemaker, you get an extra amass on both of those. Also, 2 copies of Pinecone Strike, the removal spell, deal 3, which is really nice if you get to deal 3 and also amass 1. So in what situation should I end up in Izzet? Why would I ever want to play it? If you start out with a whole bunch of noisemakers, if you have, you know, the best problem that you could ever have, which is too many goblin noisemakers, then you should actually seriously consider leaning blue instead of leaning black. I'm talking if you have like 3+ of that uncommon coming out of the first part of pack 1. I really think you should end up in Izzet very specifically if you're at a draft table where people are undervaluing that specific card, Bothersome Noisemaker. Another situation is if Rakdos is totally not open and you end up with a bunch of noisemakers specifically, you'd rather pair it with blue than with any of the other available colors. So for example, the Bothersome Noisemaker in white-red is not very good, and even though that's a supported color pair. So you should really think of Izzet in this set as a spell slinging deck that happens to only have 1 payoff. So it's kind of like, you know, the prowess decks that are dominating constructed right now, except you have to make do with 1 payoff. So clearly you're going to need a whole lot of that 1 payoff if you're going to build a deck around that idea. So it should happen very rarely, but there's a niche situation in which you actually should be playing Izzet. Next up, I want to talk about green-white Selesnya, and then the last one that we'll talk about is green-red Gruul. Unfortunately, for both of these unsupported colors, people have not played enough games for us to have any data about them really, which tells you these are really the dregs. You know, there is definitely a decent number of situations in which you should play Dimir. I would consider Dimir the unofficial 6th archetype of the format. You can kind of just build a classic control deck by pairing the good blue cards and the good black cards. Orzhov is kind of a place you end up with if you don't quite end up in mono black and you just see a few good white bombs and pair it black with those white bombs, and that'll happen some of the time. And then Izzet is just a deck you build when you get a lot of bothersome noisemakers. So when should we ever end up in Selesnya and Gruul? Selesnya is really interesting. We don't have data, but I did find a few examples of trophy decks. Here's one of them where it's actually kind of hard to make sense out of what's going on here. I kind of broke down this deck into 3 different types of cards. There are mana generators, Woodland Weavemaster, which is a 1/2 for 2 elf that taps to add mana and other complicated stuff. Troop of Ponies, which sacrifices itself to find you lands. We have 2 copies of Wood Elves, which fetches lands on entry. And then we're playing at the top end Through the Forest Gate. 8 mana, take every card out of the top 20 cards of your deck, put them into play, and you gain 8 life. And then we also have Down in the Valley. So clearly there's some huge part of this deck that's about getting a mana advantage. Then we have just some kind of mid-rangey, honestly, beat down creatures. There's an Adder Cop, there's an Iron Hills Blacksmith. These are just generic 2-drops in the deck, I think. But then we've also got 4 copies of Mirkwood Nurturer, which is a 3/2 for 3. When it enters, you return something. If you do, you get a +1/+1 counter. And that's paired with 2 copies of Patient Instructor, the 2/2 Vigilance for 3 on entry recruit. What I get out of all of this is I don't think the point of it is to play the Mirkwood Nurturer and bounce a Patient Instructor and recast it. I think with Mirkwood Nurturer, we might be bouncing the extra lands that we got a lot of the time. We're probably trying to play these 3-drops. You can't play them ahead of curve, but maybe double spell them, like 2 3-drops on turn 5 kind of thing. But it's basically just a mid-range beatdown deck, pairing green creatures and land fetching with white removal. We have 4 copies of Magnificent End, the 5 mana deal 5, and 2 copies of Stone by Sunlight, one of the best removal spells in the set, 2 mana destroy a big creature. One other example that I found, it has a minor blue splash, but it's pretty close. It's pretty clear what happened for this person. They got 4 copies of the Mirkwood Pathmaker, which is the 3 mana creature that has power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. So 4 copies of that is going to pull me into green. So I know I want to be green. That's a phenomenal uncommon. And then they also had Settle the Wreckage, which is the 4 mana white spell that exiles all attacking creatures, and they get lands equal to the number of exiled creatures. These 2 cards, I'm guessing, kind of pulled us in those 2 directions. Also Mountain King's Return. So again, this is kind of like Orzhov, a story where you have a big commitment to one color, in this case green, and then you get some white bombs. So you end up kind of Selesnya, but it's really mostly just green creatures paired with a little bit of white removal. And that's one theme that I actually want to underscore here. If you look at the removal in white, look at all the white cards. Eagles Are Coming, Iron Hills Blacksmith, Dwalin, Patient Instructor in the first deck. Those are all creatures. But then we have 6 copies of removal, Stone by Sunlight or Magnificent End. So the point I'm making is half of the white cards in the first deck are removal. And in the second deck, we have Settle the Wreckage and Magnificent End. And then we have 2 non-removal white cards. So again, half of the white cards are removal. So why would you end up in Selesnya? I mean, if you're getting good green creatures and good white removal, and probably more good green creatures and good white removal, Selesnya is an option for you. Also, it seems like mana fetching is doing something in these decks. Just kind of spitting out your whole hand seems to be a big part of it. And maybe never having a dead draw at a certain point in the game because you've just fetched so many lands. And I think the game plan on both of those decks was decidedly mid-range. I think maybe don't try to go for a ton of green and white 2-drops. Even though the first deck looks very concentrated in the 2-drop slot, really the bulk of cards are happening at the 3-drop slot with a playset of Mirkwood Nurturers plus 2 Patient Instructors. And a bunch of the what looks like 2-drops are actually instants and sorceries. So I'm going to say Selesnya is a very rare place to end up, but there's something here with a mana advantage mid-range beatdown removal plan. Gruul is even more sparse. What I want to point your attention to is that Gruul has been played online 2,245 times right now. That is actually less than either mono blue or mono black, and only a little bit more than mono green. And mono green is winning 2.2 percentage points more often than Gruul. So if you can go mono green instead of going Gruul, you probably want to. In fact, I could not find a single straight up Gruul deck that trophied at Mythic. And this is surprising to me because before the format, I thought there was some kind of red-green beatdown plan that you could go for, but it looks like if people are going for it, it is not working. So instead, I want to just close by talking about mono green and mono blue. The reason I'm picking those two out is mono white is probably not something that you should go for. And same thing with mono red. Those two are played very infrequently, and when they're played, it doesn't go well. Mono green and mono blue are comparatively real. And I don't really care to talk about mono black because I think you can figure that one out. If you get all the best cards in the best color to the extent that you can go mono black, yeah, it's going to go pretty well for you. That's actually the single best thing you can be doing in the whole set by average win rate. But you don't need a YouTube video to tell you how to do it. So let's close by talking about green and black. So mono green is exactly what you think it would be, just a pure beatdown plan. Here's one I found that trophied at Mythic with 4 copies of Wargling. This is the 2/2 for 2. When you attack, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, I believe Wargling gets +1/+0, and then all your creatures get trample. Highly aggressive 2-drop. 3 copies of Guardian of the Halls. This is the 2/2 for 2, 7 mana. You can put 3 counters on it. They have 2 Adder Cops, and then essentially 4 combat tricks or bite spells at 2 mana. Then they have a few copies of Mirkwood Pathmaker, another Mirkwood Nurturer. These are the 3 drops that we just talked about. And then really 3 larger creatures. So this is a super aggressive deck. Just aggro, beatdown, all creatures or removal. And then to make it actually be mono green, they played 2 copies of the Well-Worn Spatula. This is just the colorless equipment for 1 mana, equip 1 mana, equip creature gets +1/+1. So, I mean, if green is just absolutely flowing at the table and you can take a few good green creatures and then Wargling after Wargling after Wargling, yeah, you can probably pick up some wins. And then finally, mono blue, the only one I could find is from the only trophy deck at Mythic that I could find is from very early in the format. So I don't know how well this would fare right now. Probably better than it did back then, because I think blue might be a little bit more undervalued compared to that time. And it's basically just the rogues gallery of every good blue card. I mean, they literally have, well, every good blue common and uncommon, they literally have 7 Bilbos. So if people are just passing you Bilbo after Bilbo after Bilbo, you can, this is 4 Bilbo Baggins Burglar, the one that draws a card on entry, and 3 Bilbo Luckwearers, the one that loots on damage. If you're just getting 7 Bilbos in the course of your draft, maybe you don't need to add in another color. Maybe you can just have perfect mana every game, draw your entire deck every game, and trophy at Mythic. Sometimes, some amount of the time. All right, so I hope that you thought that this was cool, and I hope it gives you the opportunity to have some more fun in Hobbit. I think that draft sets can get pretty boring if all that there is to do is just play the same archetype over and over and over again. So I hope that this video and the last one that I posted are really unlocking for you some new ways to approach the format and have some variety of gameplay experiences. So if you enjoyed that, make sure to subscribe and keep an eye out for my next data deep dive video at the end of this week, where I'll prep you to win, hopefully, fingers crossed, win some boxes in the Arena Direct. Until tomorrow, have tons of fun playing Magic, and don't be afraid to splash.